The May 6, 2014 Longmont City Council meeting to order. This is a regular session. Could we please start with the roll call?
Yes. Mayor Coombs?
Present.
Council members Bagley?
Here.
Christensen?
Here.
Finley?
Here.
Levison?
Here.
Moore?
Here.
Santos?
Here.
Mayor Coombs, we have a quorum.
All right, we're going to have Troop 65 lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Anyone wishing to speak at first call, public invited to be heard, will need to add his or her name to the list outside the council chambers. Only those on the list will be invited to speak at first call, public invited to be heard. Speakers who do not place their names on the list will have an opportunity to speak during the public hearing items this evening or at final call, public invited to be heard on any of the items at the end of the meeting. Okay, I guess we have the April 22nd minutes. Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. On page 10, final call, public invited to be heard. And it's my own error. I'm used to living on a drive, and I moved in October on a court, and I moved to a drive. So, and gave Santos a 1088 Button Rock Court needs to be 1088 Button Rock Drive, and that's the only correction that I saw, unless others have other corrections.
I was going to point that out.
I'm sure you were, Councilmember Bagley. So with that correction, I would move the April 22nd minutes.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. That passes 7-0. Don, are there any other? Excuse me, Valerie. Are there any other revisions or additions?
Mayor Coombs, I don't have any, although I believe there was an item laid at your desk tonight, and I think it might go with the, I'm sorry, I don't know for sure, but I think it goes with the CDBG DR funds information.
Okay, is there a report from the city manager?
No report, Mayor, Council.
Okay, now it's time for our Bob Smith and Connie Seifert from the St. Vrain School District are here to give us a special presentation.
Thank you very much. Usually they turn it off when I come up. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this evening. I'm Bob Smith, Vice President of the St. Vrain Valley Schools Board of Education. Having already heard from me once when we met in our joint session, I particularly appreciate your forbearance in putting up with me again. But I did want to share with you some slides that I think speak to the question of how nurture influences brain development, and I'll do that as succinctly as I can, using mostly, in fact, 100% other folks' work. And thank you very much. Most of us, I think, understand intuitively the importance of language development on young children. But only recently, and I mean only in the last few years with advances in advanced imaging technology, have we really begun to understand empirically how things as simple as storytelling, as singing, as talking to even the youngest children, and I mean infants, profoundly affects brain development. And so that's what I'd like to cover very, very quickly. I think I gave you this question when we were together, so I won't impose upon your memory, but the single biggest predictor of who will drop out of school, get pregnant, or be in jail by the age 18 is vocabulary. I sort of think of vocabulary as the currency, if you will, with which we negotiate virtually every other thing in life. The statistics tell us that 3-year-olds, children as young as 3-year-olds, are 40% more likely to get pregnant before 18, 60% more likely to drop out of school, 80% more likely to drop out of or to end up in jail. And of course, about 90% of the kids in jail, people in jail don't have high school degrees. Now, the neuroscience underlying all this is really very complex, and it's beyond me, and I don't mean to oversimplify it, but basically, and it's most fundamental, a child's brain begins to develop connections called synapses or neural connections when they're born, and any single individual cell in the brain can actually develop as many as 15,000 connections, and the brain begins building those connections at an astonishing rate at birth. And as I said when we got together, the brain actually builds. By the time a child is 3 years old, the child builds twice as many of those connections as they will have as an adult. So virtually by the time a child is 3 years old, the opportunity to maximize the architecture of the learning, the academic architecture in the brain is maximized. And we know pretty well, and we've developed, I think, a pretty good understanding of what happens in the first couple of years of life. And in this 0 to 1, and by year 1, that child has built language circuits in the frontal and the temporal lobes that literally then create the infrastructure by which they will store vocabulary. And so that in the second year of life, that vocabulary really takes off, and it takes off in proportion to the stimulation that child has had. And then in year 3, the synaptic density in the front of the brain actually reaches its peak. And so a very, very interesting thing happens, and that is that the brain begins a pruning process. Literally by the time a child is in middle school, they've pruned trillions of connections from their brains. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, it's not unlike your garden. You don't want it to be overgrown, right? And I think the miracle of the brain is that we do this, it works this way, the human brain does this, so that we can survive and thrive in any particular environment in which we happen to be. And actually, as you can see, the growth in the number of connections kind of maximizes by 2 years. It continues to the age of 3, and then, as I said, it begins to drop off. So what's the importance of that, and what's the significance of it? The bottom line is, through these first 3 years of life, and including a month-old, 2-month, 6-month-old babies, every time we interact with that child, we're strengthening existing connections, and we are helping that child build new connections. The net effect is that we literally can impact a child's brain in that first year, and certainly in the first 2 years. And it's not simply hearing words. It's the nature of the interaction. It's the touching. It's the seeing. It's the tone of voice. It's the facial expressions that the child and really the baby interacts with and learns from. So you can't just put a child in front of a television set. Even a terrific show, and there are a lot of good things on TV. You can't just put them in front of a show and expect them to develop. Now here's the nub and the rub, if you will. The catch is that in a sort of a landmark study, some researchers looked at how many words a child is exposed to by the age of 3. In families that are professional, both parents are degreed and working in some kind of profession, in working class families, and then in lower income families. And what they came up to arrived at was the conclusion that there's virtually a 30 million word gap between the children of professional families and the children of poor or low-income families. And that then has an impact not only on how well prepared a child is, because these low-income children come to all schools, including St. Vrain schools, literally in need of remediation at preschool. They literally need remediation. Not only that, but then once they're there, they actually learn at a slower rate. So, and I've told my fellow board members, I mean, when I learned about this, I genuinely came to the conclusion that while there are many things that we can and we have been trying to do, set expectations, make sure we have the best teachers, make sure that they're using state-of-the-art teaching techniques, make sure that we're using assessments in the most appropriate way. Really, in a sense, the thing that would most transform the school district would simply be if we could get more and more parents to talk and read and share picture books with their 6-month-old and 1-year-old and 2-year-old babies. And there are a lot of programs addressed at targeting children once they're 3 years old or 4 years old and they're toddlers. But what we're getting at here is there's a great need to teach mothers and fathers and grandparents of newborns to talk and interact with the newborn child. Now, we know this is an impact of poverty. We saw 25 years ago, 25% of kids were born into poverty. I talked with Neil Bertrand recently. 50% of the babies born at Longmont United last year were Medicaid babies. Okay, and the problem is parents that have never achieved any kind of academic success don't really know how to nurture academic success. The literature is very clear. It's really these first couple of years, and what happens, and this was really demonstrated very well by the work of a gentleman from the University of Chicago. And what this Dr. Heckman has indicated is that the opportunity to maximize a child's potential, it literally peaks at 3 years old. Now, we have a great window of opportunity for the next 5 years, but literally after about 8 years of age, that opportunity greatly diminishes, okay? And the opportunity to close the achievement gap kind of disappears on us. And we know it's a function of poverty. Now, I mentioned the 30 million word gap. One of the things that came out of that study, and I'm going to try to bring this to a close very quickly. One of the things that came out of the study was not simply that health and nutrition in these children suffer, and you know, of course, what we do in terms of free and reduced lunch and so on, but and not only does the vocabulary suffer, but if you look at the third item on that chart, the third thing to be impacted is effort. And that 30 million word gap study actually explained that, because children of professional families actually hear, for every one expression of discouragement, they hear 14 expressions of encouragement. Okay? 14 to 1. Children of working class parents hear about 6 to 1. Positive to negative reinforcement. And children of low-income families, it's 2 to 1. So it's not just the number of words, it's, again, the nature of the interaction. And then the other point that I would make on here is, and I may have mentioned this, you know, I was speaking to one of our Title I schools, and by the way, poverty, free and reduced lunch in St. Vrain, when I got on the board 6 years ago, was around 31%. We're about 34% now. And across our elementary schools, I believe as a whole, it ranges from 40 to 43%. So that's what's going through the St. Vrain School District right now, and so you will see that under middle and high school. At any rate, look at number 7 on here, and the principal indicated to me, she said, you know, I wish vocabulary was the only problem our children came to school with, but there are all kinds of, they are subject to all kinds of unrelenting stress. And let me show you, this is a picture of one of these neural synapses and connections, and the one on the left is a child from a middle class or an upper professional family, and the one on the right is from a child literally reflecting a sort of neurological malnourishment, if you will. Okay, even when the connections are formed, they're not formed well. And so and you can see then why these kids have a harder time learning. So here's the case that we'll make, and I'll, as I said, I'll try to bring this to a conclusion. This is the most effective thing we could do, and we don't know exactly how to do this. I'm going to share a proposal. I don't know exactly how to do this, but this is the most effective thing. Literally reading to kids is probably the simplest, most effective thing that we could do. Nurturing all of our children in their first 5 years. So that we have the workforce we need, we have the healthy population we need. I won't go into the relationship between risk behaviors, health, and education, but as you can imagine, there's a direct and proportionate relationship, and we won't have as safe as a community as we would otherwise need. The challenge is that, and the idea behind collective impact, and that's what we're trying to put together, collective impact, is the challenge is that no single social organization is responsible for taking on this task. The city isn't, the school district isn't, many of the nonprofit agencies in our community are not specifically tasked with this one issue. So Connie is here, as Mayor Coombs mentioned. Connie is here. She's the assistant superintendent for student achievement, early education, and early learning, and she's working with agencies and folks across our region, across the entire district. She's met today with folks from the city, from many of the nonprofit organizations and foundations, and we're trying to map out how can we best leverage the work that folks are trying to do. We don't want to step in anybody's turf. We don't want to duplicate anything that anyone's doing because the resources are too scarce. But we do want to try to leverage that, connect the dots, and really focus just on this one issue. How do we nurture language in the home so that we can set the stage for preschool readiness? Because I'm very confident in Superintendent Haddad and his staff and the teachers and paraprofessionals and the janitors across our school district. We're focused on student achievement. Once we get them in preschool, we'll do our thing. But how do we make sure that all these kids come to preschool ready? So that's really what we're about. Again, I appreciate your time allowing me to rush through some of these slides, but it's important that you understand what we're trying to do, and we deeply appreciate the level of collaboration we've always had and coordination with the city. So I know I rushed through that. Mayor Coombs, any questions, comments?
I don't know that this is something that's like, it's really simple, but it's really hard. It's kind of like losing weight. You know, all you have to do is eat less and move more, but it's really a difficult thing for some people to do. So, yeah, I appreciate, I don't have any solutions to how you reach those people because you don't have access to them as a school district at that age. Councilmember Christensen.
I really like this presentation. It's wonderful, and I think it would be great. I mean, I'm sure you're probably already doing this, getting the word out to different businesses and things like that. But I like your approach of kind of comprehensively doctors and gynecologists and obstetricians and social workers. And we also have the Hour Center and all of the health and human services things. And maybe we could get together a group to hand out picture books. We could start a festival of handing out picture books or teach people to make their own. That's what I did with when my son was little. Then I got pictures of like animals and just talked to him about them. You know,
Right.
People can make their own books, and then it's kind of nice. And I also had an idea that maybe you could harness the kids in the schools to teach their younger brothers and sisters.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, because then they're helping them along too, you know.
Yeah.
But this is something we all have to do. It's wonderful of you to bring this to everybody's attention.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Connie really is doing all the heavy lifting, and she's the one aggregating the ideas, and the intent is to minimize the number of meetings and maximize the amount of action we get out of this so that we can get going on some of those kinds of ideas.
Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Eat less, move more. We don't need that propaganda. You can just take that elsewhere. I was just going to ask simply, can we get a copy of that? Could you email us a copy of that presentation?
I believe I did.
But an electronic version.
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure.
I don't have. I'm old school, man. I carry it around with me. But if you could just email it to me, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're welcome to use it. I mean, we're not. This doesn't need to be our presentation. You're welcome to use any or all of it as you see fit.
Okay, yeah, please.
That'd be great.
Councilmember Levison.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Bob, thanks to you for bringing this to us. And as you know, Connie has been working very closely with Linda Kopecki and myself and several others around the National League of Cities Technical Assistance Grant. And I have to compliment you and the board and also Dawn for allowing Connie to spend the time that she's doing, because we're getting some really good foundational work done. And there's great hope that some best practices will be developed in Longmont that'll be spread nationwide. And I'm very passionate about this early childhood issue, and I need to sit down with you and go over a few other items that I found. In fact, well, when the packet is small, I go on the internet and read. And last week, I read a wonderful report from the National Chamber of Commerce that involved a wonderful business case for why early childhood education is important for a community, for business members, and really encouraging local chambers of commerce to take up this issue. And so I'll share that report with you, and maybe we can work together to make a presentation to the Public Policy Committee on all these things, and just some amazing resources and references in that report that I learned a tremendous amount from. So I'll share that with you, and then perhaps we'll sit down and see what we can do together.
I would appreciate that. And
Thank you.
I'll reach out to you. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank you and Bob and Connie for being here tonight and enlightening our community. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and have a good evening.
All right. I guess next we've got a proclamation designating May 5th through the 11th, 2014 as Public Service Recognition Week in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas Public Service Recognition Week has been celebrated the first Monday through the first Sunday in May since 1985, it is set aside to better inform residents about the broad variety of services provided by governments, and whereas the City of Longmont has a long and proud tradition of providing a wide variety of services to its citizens, such as police and fire protection, emergency response, trash and recycling collection, street construction and maintenance, traffic control, animal control, code enforcement, forestry, water and wastewater delivery and treatment, economic development support and services, library services, youth and senior programs, recreation programs, museum and culture programs, park construction and maintenance, planning and engineering, courts and probation services, electric and telecommunication utilities, and whereas the employees who provide these direct services are supported by additional public service providers such as administrative support personnel, custodians, clerks, fleet maintenance workers, risk management personnel, purchasing and contracts employees, accountants, cashiers, payroll clerks, and human resource personnel. And whereas the tradition of outstanding public service is advanced every day in Longmont by more than 800 full-time and part-time municipal employees, and an additional 350 to 400 temporary employees who work diligently to improve and sustain the quality of life for those who live in, work in, and visit the City of Longmont. And whereas Longmont's public service employees dedicate their time, talent, and energy to serving our citizens and spend much of their free time participating in volunteer work and civic service projects. And whereas it is important to recognize and salute the outstanding efforts made each year by the dedicated public service employees who provide these services. Now, therefore, I, Dennis L. Coombs, and the City Council of the City of Longmont do hereby designate the week of May 5th through the 11th, 2014 as Public Service Recognition Week in Longmont, and urge all citizens to provide a word of encouragement or thanks to any public servant that they encounter during the week. Wow, it's amazing all the jobs that this city does, and I can hardly believe you do it with just 800 full-time employees. Yeah, I guess I need to present this to somebody from staff. Sandy, accept it.
Make a motion.
She's gonna hold up the meeting.
That would mean all members of staff that are present would have to come down. Nick. Come on, Lucero.
You see my family?
There we go. Nice try.
Push this button. Point you. Right out front where you go.
Hey, Kimberly, aren't you technically? All right. 1, 2, 3. One more. 2, 3. Thank you very much.
Mayor,
ahead, Harold.
if I can say a few words
Sure.
about this. One of the things, and we've been pointing this out in numerous presentations, but really is to highlight the work that's being done by everyone in the organization, not only in times where they have to respond to natural disasters, but what they do on a daily basis in serving the residents of our community and working to make our community great. So again, a big thank you from me to everyone else in terms of everything that they do on a daily basis to serve our community. I would like to say that there are some activities going on this week. Today there was a big breakfast delivery to various locations in the organization. Thursday afternoon there's going to be a snack delivery to, again, various locations in the organization. One of the things that we're trying to do is to pick different locations and ask folks to go to those areas where they may not normally go so they can meet their coworkers and have a conversation with them. And then on Saturday, we're also having an event which council has been invited to. It should be fun. It's a little bit different this year, but we really wanted to do something special for the folks, to thank them for the outstanding work that they did this year, and in responding to the probably the most significant issue that this organization has ever faced, which was the flood in September of last year. So some activities for folks to really thank everyone for what they do. And I want to say thank you. They make this community great.
Well, I'd like to speak on behalf of the entire city council. You know, it's amazing when you go to community fundraisers in this town, how many people you see from our city staff and city employees that are there supporting our community. I just know that the people that work for the city love this city, and I really appreciate each and every one of them. So they do work hard, and it was like during the flood, nobody said that wasn't my job. Everybody did everything they could and worked side by side with different departments. I mean, it was just an amazing group of people, and I'm just really proud to be a mayor of a city that has this quality of workforce. Thank you again from me and the whole entire city council.
Mayor, can I add one other piece?
Sure.
On behalf of the employees, we are thanking Harold because you may remember that he gave up a portion of his raise last year, and we've carried over that money to have the party on Saturday. So thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Harold.
Okay. I guess it's time for second reading. Oh, excuse me. We got two people here. Okay, first call public invited to be heard is Chris McKilvery. Yeah. McKilvery. Go ahead and state your name and address for the record.
Chris McGilvray, 137 Main Street.
Okay.
Mayor Coombs, City Council, Chris McGilvray. I am a small business owner and a property owner located directly across the street from once the Butterball Factory. At one point, this area was once a thriving economic industrial area, and by once, I'm referring to 50 years ago. Since the closing of this Butterball plant in December of 2011, this area has been a dead industrial part of Longmont, as well as a huge eyesore for everybody passing by. The city adopted the First and Main Station Transit Revitalization Plan, in which you, the City Council, adopted in the summer of 2012. Very exciting stuff. The biggest missing link, in my opinion, to this plan coming to fruition is a strong partnership between the city and that of a private investor. An investor who's both willing and able to invest a significant amount of their time as well as financial resources into revitalizing this dead, ugly part of our downtown. I believe we have tonight the missing link. We have representatives from 150 LLC presenting to you their preliminary plan and their vision for this area, which is directly in alignment with our overall vision of First and Main Revitalization Plan. I'm asking for and expecting 100% City Council support. 150 LLC needs 100% support. The City of Longmont needs 100% support. 99% support with an ounce of hesitation is just not enough. So in my estimation, the result of this transformation will do three things. One, it's going to encourage further economic investment and growth. Obviously what this means is more jobs, more housing, which we've been talking a lot about, and obviously additional tax revenue back to the city to reinvest. Two, it's going to continue to push the city First and Main vision to a reality. And three, it's going to result in significant improvements with our overall reputation and look of downtown and our Longmont. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chris. Clara White.
Good evening, Clara White, 103 Main Street. Hello, everyone. I'm here to also show my support for the revitalization project and plan of downtown. We love our place, we love our customers, we love our city, and we definitely, Chris just put it all out perfectly. We need to put some love and some excitement into the downtown area and continue to give people reasons of why to come downtown and spend time all over downtown, not just in certain areas. And I know when I drive around the perimeter of the city, there seems to be a lot of business and a lot of people out there, and I think we need to do things to develop the downtown and bring more people downtown. And this project will definitely support that in a great big way. It just brings a lot more people to that area, and it definitely needs some love and some beauty brought to it for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Okay, that ends first call public invited to be heard.
Mayor Coombs, next on your agenda are the second reading and public hearings. First is item 8A, ordinance 2014-19, a bill for an ordinance amending chapter 6.26 of the Longmont Municipal Code on cable television franchises. And we do not have a formal staff presentation on this item, but do have staff available to answer questions.
Okay, any questions from council before I open this up for a public hearing? Seeing none, I will now open this for public hearing on ordinance 2014-19. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this ordinance at this point? I guess seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I'd like to move ordinance 2014-19.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. That passes 7-0.
Your next item is ordinance 2014-20, a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 15.06 of the Longmont Municipal Code regarding downtown sign design standards, and Brian Schumacher is here to make a short presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Brian Schumacher with Economic Development. All right, I will try to be fairly brief. I think I have a few PowerPoint slides to show you this evening. It shouldn't last more than 5 or 10 minutes at the most. So I wanted to give you an overview, a little bit of background regarding the process that we went through. Let me get the clicker here. So the downtown design standards for signs originated out of a couple of things. One, we had recommendations from the placemaking committee associated with the Arts and Entertainment District that felt that signs were a priority for the downtown. Also last year at the DDA board retreat, they made it a recommendation. Okay, sorry, I'm done. The board made a recommendation to develop sign design guidelines for the downtown. And those were based on goals and policies of 2 existing documents for the downtown, that being the Downtown Master Plan for Development, as well as the Arts and Entertainment District Strategic Report and Action Plan. In conjunction with the sign design standards, the board agreed to provide some incentive funds for signage in the downtown and set aside $100,000 for downtown businesses for new signs, as well as to convert non-conforming signs to signs that would comply with the new design standards. Businesses can receive up to a 50% matching grant, up to $3,500 for signage. And I believe at the last DDA board meeting that there was a business already there applying for a grant funding for some awning signage for their business. It's important to point out that existing legal non-conforming signs, they can continue as long as a business is there at their location, as long as they'd want to have that existing signage. They would not need to change that signage even with the adoption of the sign design standards. It would be when a business changes, they'd come in for a new sign that they'd be asked to comply with the new sign design standards. If a business is interested in upgrading their non-conforming signs, they can apply for grant funding through the DDA. And then also signs in place without a current permit that are non-conforming would need to come into compliance. So code enforcement staff will be working with the DDA and existing businesses that might have signs that they didn't get a permit for that are non-conforming to address compliance. In terms of community input associated with this process, soon after the recommendation from the DDA board last year to start developing sign design standards for the downtown, we put together a sign committee, and that was comprised of LDDA and city staff, as well as downtown business and property owners, as well as members of the placemaking committee. The sign standards were discussed at several meetings with the downtown block captains group, as well as business owners group. 2 open meetings were held with business owners and property owners to discuss the sign standards. And then the sign standards were also reviewed by a consultant that the DDA hired who specializes in downtown areas to provide some input before they were reviewed by the DDA board. Throughout the process, there was general support from the proposed sign design standards, as well as the financial incentives for signage. With respect to the proposed sign code changes, the first and foremost is the adoption of the downtown sign design standards that are attached to the ordinance. The standards focus primarily on design features to encourage creativity in sign design and enhancing the visual quality of the downtown. The intent is to create more of a pedestrian feel in terms of signage. We did not change any allowances in terms of what a business could have in terms of signage, in terms of either number of signs or sign area. That's still as currently allowed by code. Provisions in the design standards, as well as code provisions, also allow for flexibility for businesses to come up with creative designs that would allow perhaps additional numbers of signs or size of signs through the modification process or the master sign plan process. So the next few slides are just pictures, and they're just examples of existing signs in the downtown that are good examples of different types of signs that are consistent with the proposed sign standards. Some of these signs were constructed with previous LDDA grant assistance. So this is a example of a wall sign that's compatible with the building design and is in the appropriate placement for a wall sign. It has exterior lighting. This is another similar example for an externally lit wall sign with appropriate placement and scale for the type of building. This is another wall sign with external lighting, and this is a new business that received facade improvement grant through the DDA for street and alley storefront improvements. Crackpots also received facade improvement grant funding from the DDA, and their intent was to recreate more of a historic character with their facade that was consistent with the kind of the history of the downtown, and their signage is also externally lit. This is an example of a projecting banner sign that Sunrose Cafe incorporated into their design, and it's particularly effective for new businesses that might not have a lot of money to invest in signage, and it's more of a pedestrian scale signage that's along the sidewalk, and I think they're very effective for both pedestrians and motorists. This is just an example of some professionally designed window signage. And this is an example of a combination of awning and window signs that can be very effective and visible for both pedestrians and motorists. And you also note on this particular photograph that there's some recent tree trimming that's occurred in the downtown. And the DDA worked with the city forestry staff as well as contracted out with a tree trimming contractor to trim up some of the trees, or a lot of the trees actually, and they're continuing to work in the downtown area. And the primary purpose behind that is to enhance and increase the visibility of business signs in the downtown. And Kimberly can certainly talk about that more if you have questions regarding that. This is an example of an under canopy sign. It's another example of a nicely designed but fairly inexpensive pedestrian scale sign. Let's see. This is just a new sign for the new project over Roosevelt Park Apartments. This is a canopy style sign with individual channel lettering. This is a sign that actually a combination of wall and awning signs. Again, it's type of combination of signs that work well together. And this next slide just shows the same sign at night with the, it has a halo effect type of lighting, which is something that we're encouraging in the standards. And the last picture is an example of a projecting sign from Crackpots. They're artful signs with mounting hardware that's compatible with the building design. So in terms of some additional notes regarding the proposed sign changes, one component of that is that there's a downtown design board that's being established with these code updates. And the downtown sign board, design board, is the same as the LDDA board. They would have authority through the adoption of these code amendments to review and approve signage for the downtown area and provide that recommendation then onto the city as part of the sign permit process. One thing that we wanted to incorporate into this review process to keep it as streamlined as possible was to have the majority of the signs reviewed and approved administratively. So the executive director of the DDA has that authority under the Downtown Design Board to approve signs. The director would also have the ability if she felt it was necessary to consult with the Design Advisory Committee, or she could send it up to the board for review and consideration. There's also an appeal process that if an applicant didn't agree with the decision of the executive director on the sign application, that they could appeal that decision up to the design board. The downtown review and approval process would occur prior to a city sign permit, although our intent is to have city staff, primarily me, reviewing and taking a look at those sign applications as they come to the downtown and do a cursory review of those just to point out any potential issues that might come up with respect to sign code compliance, just to avoid any time lags and delays. And then the review process also allows for modifications for the sign standards. A few other things. As noted in the ordinance, a couple of other minor changes we feel are relatively minor changes. One would allow DDA banners on light posts and other fixtures in the right-of-way and public property. This is already a current practice, and we're just kind of codifying that information. It would also allow projecting signs in all non-residential districts in the downtown and other areas. It would update sign standards for portable signs and special event signs and banners. And then the final bullet, it would include allowances for authentic historic signs on historic landmark properties in the downtown and other areas. So for example, if the Trojan Theater on the 500 block wanted to relight that marquee with neon lighting, our current code has some restrictions regarding the use of neon lighting in signage, so that would allow them to be able to do that as one example. In terms of code amendments, there's two criteria in the code that talk about what a code amendment needs to comply with. One is general compliance with the Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan, and the other is the proposed amendment is consistent with the purpose and intent standards statements of the municipal code. And those are attached. There was an analysis provided as part of the Plan and Zoning Commission packet. Those criteria are addressed, and the findings were provided as part of that review criteria analysis when it went to the Plan and Zoning Commission. So my last slide, with respect to the review process as this went through in terms of public meetings, the DDA board and the Planning and Zoning Commission, the DDA board unanimously recommended adoption of the downtown design standards. The board also approved the sign incentive funding. The Planning and Zoning Commission also unanimously recommended adoption of the amendments and the sign design standards. I also wanted to point out on your agenda this evening that in addition to this ordinance, item 9D, which is the IGA amendment between the city and the LDDA related to this item, the IGA amendment includes the role of the Downtown Design Board as a service to the LDDA that they'll provide in the duties and LDDA section. In addition, the language is specific with respect to the downtown design standards, and it includes information regarding the indemnification section related to the DDA review of sign applications. So that concludes my remarks. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
So maybe off the record, you can show me the pictures you took of signs that weren't so well designed.
Yeah, we can
I'd
do
like
that.
to see the good and the bad. Didn't see that one. I just want to make sure it's not on the bad list. Councilmember Christensen.
I think this is a very good report. I know that I can see that people put a lot of time into it, and I particularly want to applaud you for remembering historical signs and for the tree trimming, which kind of eliminates, the trees make it very difficult to see signs a lot of times, so that's really important. And the money available for people to upgrade their signs, because one of the main things, my concerns is that I'm the only person here who's probably designed signs, built signs, hung signs, and purchased signs, so this is something I actually know a little bit about. And I know how much it costs, and my concern is that downtown is a real jewel because it's full of individual little companies who, some of them are struggling, and some of them are doing fine, and some of them have good taste, like cheese importers, and some of them, yeah, not so much, and that's the reason, but we don't want to put people out of business. And so I was glad you addressed the 45-day thing, because that's way too long to get back to people. It really should be a week, My other concern is once somebody has gotten to the point where they have a sign to present to you, they've already spent a lot of money and time. And I would hate to see kind of this any kind of micromanagement and people making vague choices about, they're imposing their aesthetics on somebody else. But I don't think that's happening. My one great objection to something in here is that there's a whole section on what people can put inside their businesses that faces out. I don't really think the city has any right to tell people what they can put in their windows, because there are some people who have, or what percentage, like 25%, you can't put more than 25% of your window full of something that obscures it. I really don't think that the city has a right to get into anything inside somebody's business. I just don't. Can you explain to me why that would be the case? Because it seems very arbitrary when we have businesses that have the blinds drawn. Well, that's obscuring everything. We have businesses with blacked out windows. I don't understand that part of it.
Mayor, Councilmember Christensen, okay. I know that code provision, and it's actually in the municipal code. It's been in there for long before I was actually with the city. So it's been at least 20, 25 years that provision has been part of the code, that restriction in terms of the percentage of advertising on a window opening.
The pantry always used to, the other thing is hand-painted signs, which are really part of, it's a classic American skill. It's a classic American art form. And for instance, the pantry always had these incredible hand-painted signs. And that would be outlawed under this. Well, it says no hand-painted windows, and they covered the entire windows.
And there's a modification process. I mean, if they're tasteful and they're well done, we could certainly look at that in terms of a modification.
I just don't want to put the sign painter guys out of business because, they're really good.
Councilmember Levison.
Thank you. Brian, I think I understood what you meant when you talked about the use of neon. So if neon was an original feature to a sign, such as the Trojan Theater, neon would be able to be reinstalled if they wanted to upgrade or go back to neon. However, if it was not an original feature, then it would be disallowed. You couldn't do it as a new sign.
Well, on the theater, obviously it's a historic landmark. We would want whatever signage goes on the theater to be historically accurate or authentic to the extent possible. I know historically the Trojan Theater has had neon outside of on the marquee part that's not part of the sign lettering. And so if they wanted to restore that, that would certainly be allowed with these provisions. Our current code allowances limits neon signage, or the use of neon just to the lettering of the sign. And that could be proposed in other businesses downtown currently. But in terms of having maybe that waterfall effect on the marquee of the Trojan Theater, that would be allowed with these provisions.
Great. And then the code, I didn't see specifically addressing like LED kind of, I won't say billboard, but the electronic type signs that you can have, that would not be existing in downtown area in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I guess you could do it on the interior if you wanted to, but still within that 25% coverage of the window, but it wouldn't be an exterior electronic sign.
Right, in terms of electronic message boards, right, that would not be allowed. There is a provision, and I know there's an example across the street from the Development Services Center. One of the businesses, which is a real estate office, they kind of have a interactive kiosk where you can look up listings utilizing an LCD screen. That's something that's potentially could be allowed through these provisions. It's more of a window interactive display. But the larger electronic message boards, no, those currently wouldn't be allowed.
So you couldn't just have something streaming that had like Wall Street ticker tape or, like the banner headline on CNN running with news stories or what other in electronic form, nothing like that.
And those electronic message boards currently aren't allowed anywhere in the city.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Brian, just one question. Is there any review going on about any structural design to make sure that they're going to be safe after installation?
Mayor and Councilmember Moore, yes, that's correct. That's part of our building permit review process. I need to make sure that the attachment to the building or whatever structural part is meeting our engineering requirements and building code and sign code requirements.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Appreciate that. You noticed I'm a lot better this week. The withdrawals of the Diet Coke are over. Back, I'm riding high, guys. We're good. Which I gave up, by the way, for those of you who didn't know. But yes. So now it's water for me from now on. But I guess I understand what Councilmember Christensen's saying. But I kind of look at this as a little bit like covenants in an HOA. And I'm a big believer in property rights, and you can do what you want with your own property. However, it ends when you infringe on my property rights. And it's a balancing act. And so I think that, I was totally against covenants and totally against this kind of stuff until I had a neighbor when I moved into my brand new home that decided to paint his fence, his 6-foot fence, alternating blue, orange, blue, orange, blue, orange, with the old Denver Broncos sign on the middle of his garage. Classy, I will admit, but just not something I want to see, and nor would anyone wanting to buy my home. And so I look at this as kind of like going back to what your concern, the hand-painted signs. I think that this allows people, the group downtown, as they're spending a lot of money to invest in the apartment buildings and invest in grants for the signs, et cetera, to make sure that one person, I'm assuming that it's, I imagine someone blacking out the window in order to do seedy behavior, grow plants, just basically out of character with what we're trying to do with downtown. And so, and I feel comfortable with what I read and what I've heard, given that there's clear set guidelines, but there's also a review process by the city that will then allow us to, there's an appeal process and there's a way to make sure that if someone is really being abused, that it can be addressed. So I guess my question is have we had public? We're not ready for motion yet, so I won't make that motion.
Mayor, if I could add one item to that. With regard to Councilmember Christensen's concern, the actual, I think what you may be referring to in some ways is artwork, like at Christmas time when people paint their windows, et cetera. That actually wouldn't be, as long as the name of the business or a product that they serve inside the business, as long as that's not in the artwork, that would be considered artwork. And as long as it didn't cover more than 25% of the total window area, that would not be regulated. And I just confirmed that, and Brian, you might double check me on that. But I think that anything that was artwork that's hand painted would be fine. But a makeshift sign that's just kind of handwritten, et cetera, would not be allowed for the signage itself.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, because that's exactly what I was going to say on page 17 of the of the packet, designed the downtown Longmont sign design standards. It specifically states no hand painted signage or signs that cover more than 25% of the window. So, I mean, I know of businesses, and several businesses, and I remember the pantry market as well, that didn't cover 25%. In fact, I know of a particular cafe here in town. They have a hand painted sign. It's not in the DDA, but it doesn't cover. It doesn't even cover 25%. They have a sign that says, they post a particular item, the price, and what have you. Again, as long as it doesn't cover more than 25%, and again, there is a review process. An appeal process. So we're not putting anybody out of. No one's trying to put anyone out of business. There are standards, and as Councilmember Bagley said, you're working within the confines of the DDA, and there are rules and regulations if you want to do business down there. So these are the rules.
Councilmember Christensen.
Okay, well, the pantry market always had pretty much 95% of the windows covered. And the North Main Mexican restaurant has about 80% of their windows covered with. And it's wonderful. It's, hand-painted, wonderful stuff. The other thing I was concerned about is cabinet signs. There's an example in here of the Rainbow Center. And cabinet signs are, I don't find them very attractive, but if you are buying a sign, that's the most cost-effective sign. It's the easiest sign to get. So, once again, if you're willing to give people some money to help them with that. But I don't want to put out small business people who are just trying to get started and haven't got $10,000 for a sign. They've got $200 for a sign. And I find some of this a little arbitrary, but anyway.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. A little known fact about Bonnie Finley is in the late 1980s, I worked for the Heart of Longmont Business Association, which was housed in the DDA office. Part of my job was to go around and visit with businesses in the downtown, and I can't tell you how many times I heard complaints about other businesses' signs. And actually, when the trees were first planted, everyone was mad because nobody could see any signs. So I'm really glad to see someone take this issue on, because it's been an issue for a really, really long time, and I think it was well done, and I will support it.
All right. Well, thank you, Brian. There's no further questions. Any other comments?
Mayor, if I could just make one additional comment. We did have a number of enforcement issues similar to probably what Councilmember Finley is discussing when I first got here. And we really were ready to go out and start enforcing the code, but realized that we had not adopted these design guidelines that were referenced in some 2012, I believe it was, regulations that you all passed at that time. And so I just want to commend Kimberly and her board for taking a very proactive approach in taking these to the businesses, involving property owners, involving business owners. Even as we were pushing her, please hurry, she took a very metered approach and came up with something that I think is really good, involved city staff throughout the process. And I do think that, with all sign guidelines, there will be, modifications that will have to be made as we go through and do this. But I do think particularly in historic districts, there are, in most historic districts, there are sign guidelines that are more restrictive than in other parts of the community. And I think that that's what you see, such as the cabinet signs that Councilmember Christensen referenced.
Well, just speaking from personal experience, when the Sunrose Cafe first opened up, I was trying to find, everybody was raving about how good it was, and I was trying to find it. And it was just really difficult because of the tree canopy, and, just driving by, you couldn't find, you had to physically walk by it to find it the first time with that banner sign. So I know how important signs are when you're trying to find a new place, so you don't know exactly where it's at. Okay, I guess it's time for a public hearing on this. I'll open the public hearing on ordinance 2014-20. Would anybody from the public like to speak on this ordinance? I guess seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing on this ordinance. Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move ordinance 2014-20.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Okay, let's vote. Okay, it passes 6-1 with Councilmember Christensen dissenting.
Mayor Coombs, your next item is the consent agenda. The first item is 9A, ordinance 2014-21, I'm sorry. A bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for the expenses and liabilities of the city of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2014. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for May 20th. Item 9B is ordinance 2014-22, a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the 9th Avenue and Hover Street rezoning from residential low-density R1 to residential planned unit development PUDR generally located on the southwest corner of 9th Avenue and Hover Street. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for May 20th. Item 9C is ordinance 2014-23, a bill for an ordinance authorizing the city of Longmont to amend the lease of real property known as Van Sprem Municipal Airport Hangar Parcel 4, the premises to CAG International, Inc., doing business as Elite Aviation. Public hearing and second reading of this ordinance is scheduled for May 20th. Item 9D is Resolution 2014-48, approving an amendment to the intergovernmental agreement between the city and Longmont Downtown Development Authority for support and services. And we would like to pull item 9A for a short staff presentation.
Okay. Are there any other items to be removed from the consent agenda? Councilmember Bagley.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to pull 9C.
9C, okay. And Councilmember Santos.
I guess I'll move the consent agenda minus A and C.
Okay. Okay, the consent agenda minus A and C has been moved and seconded. Let's vote. Okay, it passes 7-0.
First item pulled is the ordinance 2014-21 on additional appropriations. Teresa Malloy will make that presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Teresa Malloy, Budget Manager. And since this appropriation is quite large, we thought we would just take an opportunity to make a few comments here this evening. So this appropriation is just under $56 million, one of the bigger ones that we've ever done, I think, at least that I've ever done. And so what I wanted to remind council members is that by city charter, our appropriations in all of our funds except one lapses at the end of the year. That fund is our public improvement fund. Those funds don't lapse at the end of the year, but every other fund that we have, appropriations lapse at the end of the year. And so what we have to do, if we've got projects where we were not complete, where those projects were not completed, we need to carry those funds over. And so much of the appropriation, much of the dollars that's included in this appropriation is carryover funds from last year, both CIP funds, flood and non-flood, as well as some operating projects. And then there's encumbrances as well. There is some non-carryover included on here, but that's probably a very small percentage compared to the rest of the of what's on here. It is mainly carryover of both flood and non-flood related items from last year. So that was all I wanted to point out. We do have a lot of staff in the audience if you've got specific questions on any particular item.
Councilmember Santos?
Thank you, Mayor. Teresa, I don't have a question on one particular item, but regarding flood items from here on out, every year, we're going to be seeing carryovers for the next several years, aren't we?
Mayor Coombs and Councilmember Santos, yes, you probably will be for a few years.
Okay, just want to put that out there. So we'll be seeing additional appropriations regarding flood items for the next several years.
And I guess I would also point out that in addition to carryover, we may come back to you with an appropriation of new funds that you have not seen before
That's going to be my next
as well.
thought, too. So thank you very much.
Okay, any further questions? All right. Councilmember Finley?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I just would like to move this item 9A.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. Okay, that passes 7-0.
And the next item pulled was ordinance 2014-23. Tim Barth is here to talk about.
Councilmember Bagley?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Oh, don't glare, Mr. Barth. We're all good. So I didn't read my packet until after I met with you today, City Manager Dominguez. And so this isn't a big deal. It's not a criticism, but it's something it's a question that I have for council, legal, Tim Barth, Harold Dominguez, and I figured instead of wasting time, why not do it in public on television and when everyone can hear. So I love the airport. I've decided lately that I've got 4 hours of flying under my belt, but so I am now an expert. You know, but as I was out there at the airport, 3 or 4 times over the last couple of weeks, and now that we have a lease coming up, my question is, what are the limitations on the lease? Because I've been sold by airport management and the city staff and the airport board, and we're focused on making sure that we have a great airport. But when I'm walking around, I'm noticing that a lot of the hangars out there, I noticed one guy lives in it. There's a guy out there, he lives in it. Or like I saw another one, like that was up, but it was full of cars and like washing machines. So my question is, I don't know what the lease says. I don't know what we can do about it. I don't know if this falls under the definition of arbitrary or whatnot, but I guess the question I have is, what are the standards? What does it take to get a hangar? And just wondering.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, Tim Barth, the airport manager. Councilmember Bagley, you pose a good question, and you've made some observations, not unlike city staff in the past year hasn't made themselves. The airport is supposed to be used for aviation purposes. Every hangar is supposed to house an aircraft. We've been battling this somewhat for the last 5 years with the storage of non-aviation items in the hangar. As far as someone living out there, I have yet to see that, but I know people occupy quite a lot of time out there. One of the things that we've been working on for the past 9 months is strengthening our airport rules and regulations. We've taken these back to the airport board for about the last 5 meetings. In fact, they're on our agenda again this coming Thursday. And what we're trying to do is work with the city attorney's office to make sure that we got the appropriate language in there so that we can beef up that section in conjunction with the lease so that we can have better enforcement out there to actually utilize the hangars for aviation purposes. There's no doubt that people have stored other items that are in there, and every year we do an inspection of the commercial businesses, and about every 3 years we go through and do an inspection of every hangar on the airport. We have to work with our tenants because we have to gain access to the hangars. And I'm pretty sure that when the inspections happen, a couple of days before their hangars are inspected, there's probably a midnight run out there. Everything is pulled out of the hangars, passes inspection, and a couple of days later at midnight, some of that stuff goes back in. And it's been a struggle for us. Ideally, if there was more of me to go around, I'd be able to stay on top of every hangar that is out there and perform these inspections every year. But realistically, when we do hangar inspections, we coincide them with the building inspection department and the fire department. And to get through 124 buildings and coordinate everybody's schedule, it's usually about a 4-month process.
Right. I guess first of all, my question, I'm not taking a dig at the airport. This is something that I think you're doing a great job. I've never heard anybody, at least not at the airport, say anything negative about you. No, outside the airport. No, just kidding. I guess the reason I knew it wasn't because I was observing, is I was out there. People would come up and go, "Hey, by the way, since you're my city councilman, why don't you get that guy to actually get his junk out of the hangar? Why don't you get that guy to get an airplane because he shouldn't have his hangar?" And so I guess I'm only one of 7, but as we're talking about changing and altering leases, I think we should act. I don't know if you need additional support from council or whatnot, but whatever we need to do to actually use legal, airport management, and city council to actually start clearing out those hangars and use them primarily for aviation, I think that would have a domino effect of kind of enhancing everything from how it looks all the way to people complaining about airport noise because people might be a little flippant over respecting their neighbors. So that was just my observation. Nothing, related to the changing of the lease, but I was just looking for a good opportunity to bring it up, and there it was. So you're doing a great job, but I'd love to hear more on your ideas about how we can actually be more effective on that. So with that, I'd actually move 9C.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'm also going to support this. I think this is a good amendment for this lease. One question that I have, I keep getting, particularly one person always calls me several times a week saying that all these pilots don't fly in the recommended zones. I've got no idea if they do or they don't. I know I can hear planes that, depending on the wind direction, either well south or well north, but they don't bother me, so I don't track it. But if there was some consistent pilot that was consistently on purpose flying well out of the recommended zones and his lease was coming up, I wouldn't support renewing his lease. I mean, that's the only leverage we really have, but without knowing the specifics. And I think probably 95% of the pilots out there do care about being good neighbors, but there's always the 5% that don't. So, all right, we've got a motion that's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Santos?
Thank you, Mayor. Harold, you have something to say?
Go ahead, no.
Okay. Well, getting back to actually the topic at hand, I'm not even quite sure that council can take a position on whether somebody flies outside of a pattern and not renew a lease. So that's a slippery slope. The lease amendment with Elite is solid. What Councilmember Bagley talked about, the Airport Advisory Board, as Tim mentioned, we'll be looking at again at our next meeting on Thursday, as you said. Now, the Airport Advisory Board has been meeting and working hard on the new lease and regulations at the airport. But it's my understanding there might be some sort of legal concern regarding how those leases and how inspections can go on. So I guess when those new lease language and rules and regulations at the airport comes to council, that perhaps we have a study session about how that comes about, because I threw out a proposal that surprise inspections. And a member of the public caught me afterwards and says, I don't like that idea. It's my hangar. Yeah, exactly. I have rights. I said, but you know what? In the lease, it does say we have inspection rights of those leases to ensure that the lease is being, that you're using the airport properly, that you're not storing things that are not safe at the airport in the hangar. That is, those leases are and those hangars are being used for airport aviation purposes. So unless somebody's got their finger on the button, which I think somebody does, unless members of staff have something to say. So again, Airport Advisory Board is looking at that, and getting back to the germaneness of the topic of elite aviation, I would encourage a yes vote on this.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. I also will be supporting this ordinance. I think this is the direction the airport needs to go, get some solid business going out there. And to follow up on Councilmember Bagley's comments, I can only think of one reason why people would want to store cars, boats, motorcycles, washing machines, live in there part-time, is it's cheap. It's cheaper than self-storage. It's a way for them to get by on the cheap, and they're abusing the purpose of having the airport, and they're taking up valuable hangar space that could be used for aviation purposes. So that's just a general comment, but I will be supporting the ordinance.
And Councilmember Christensen.
Well, I'd like to get back to the topic too, but on that comment, I know people who build airplanes out there. It takes a lot of effort to build an airplane. You basically have to pretty much live there for a while if you're building an airplane. So that's the reason some people are have like a refrigerator and whatever. Anyway, I'm curious about why the drone thing that we approved several weeks ago, I think, that's contingent upon granting this. So I'm curious about why we never heard about this at the same time.
So Mayor, Councilmember Christensen, when we initially approved the drone operation to take place at the airport, that was to engage in services with the city. In order to get them out to the airport, we had to find them a suitable commercial building, which is the Elite Aviation Building. Because it was leased originally as an FBO without the manufacturing clause in that lease, in order for us to comply with our own regulations, we need to amend the lease so that we can conduct manufacturing in that building.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. If my memory recalls, and it's pretty good, I believe that was part of the discussion. Yes. That they would cohabitate with Elite. Yeah. Yeah. I believe that was discussed.
Okay, well, we've got a motion that's been seconded. Let's vote. Okay, that passes 7-0. Thank you, Kim.
Okay, Mayor Coombs, your next item is, I guess, general business item. First and Main redevelopment update, and David Starnes is here to present this.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. David Starnes, Redevelopment Program Manager for the city. Tonight I have a brief presentation on update for the First and Main redevelopment. Back in June 2012, City Council approved the First and Main Transit and Revitalization Plan. This plan represents the community vision for transformation of this area around First and Main. The plan identifies the goals and opportunities associated with revitalization and reinvestment of this area through a shared public and private investment that includes investment in a future multimodal transit center. This plan also identifies recommended public sector actions that will set the framework for private sector investment, such as infrastructure investment and zoning to facilitate a balanced mix of residential, office, retail, and other uses complementary to our downtown area. We are beginning to see renewed interest in this area. In 2012, Cheese Importers, a unique destination retail store and bistro, opened in the city's former electric power plant and is bringing new life and activity to this portion of downtown. A number of recently completed and planned infrastructure improvements and other public projects for the area will help set the stage for reinvestment in this key area. These include investments in capital improvements to South Main Street, the extension of Boston Avenue between Main and Martin Street, and Main Street bridge improvements that will further improve the area. Furthermore, the city and its consultant partners are preparing St. Vrain Blueprint, a redevelopment study which is assessing near and long-term strategies to facilitate reinvestment in the areas surrounding the river and greenway. This will complement ongoing efforts in capital improvement projects to mitigate the flood hazard of the river, which is especially relevant in light of the flooding last year that impacted our community. In late 2013, the city and 150 Main LLC began preliminary discussions as part of a potential public-private partnership regarding the redevelopment of a former large-scale food processing facility, one of the catalyst sites identified in the First and Main plan. The opportunities for redevelopment within this area remain challenging. While the city enacted a new mixed-use zoning designation for the area to facilitate reinvestment, the transitional nature of the area represent a development risk for a mix of uses consistent with the First and Main plan. To facilitate redevelopment, the city has had initial discussions with 150 Main LLC for a potential public-private partnership and incentives to transform this now vacant property to a high-quality development that will serve as a catalyst to help redefine the southern portion of our downtown and continue to implement the guiding plan for this area, which is the First and Main Transit Plan. Tonight, 150 Main LLC will present an update on the preliminary concepts and key elements for redevelopment of the site, challenges associated with redevelopment, and potential public incentives and investment to be considered as part of a partnership for future council consideration. And after the representative from 150 Main LLC presents, I'd like to come back, and I have one action item as part of this agenda item that I would like you to consider. So with that, I'll turn it over to a representative from 150 Main LLC.
Thank you, David. Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you for your time this evening. My name is Brian Baer. I'm a representative of 150 Main LLC, and my address is 7552 North 83rd Street. Got a presentation for you tonight, a few slides. Really wanted to accomplish three things. Wanted to give you an update on the redevelopment plan of where we're at today, talk about some challenges for the project, show you some concepts for phase one of the redevelopment, and lastly, talk about a public-private partnership and why we feel it's important and critical to not only the redevelopment of the First and Main area, but specifically the Butterball properties. You got it? A little bit about who we are and some history. We're a local Colorado company. We've got over 20 years of experience in Colorado, and we've done a number of infill development projects in different downtown areas. Some examples up on the screen of a project you may be familiar with up in Loveland called Lincoln Place, which was a full city block that was redeveloped. The old Loveland Hospital, which was redeveloped into a senior living facility up in the mountains in Edwards and at Stapleton. So we have experience with these types of sites and these types of projects and working with cities in both public-private partnerships, urban renewal districts, and very excited about this opportunity. So taking it from a very high level, and David spoke to some of this, but we think there's some key elements to redeveloping this area. And I'm happy to say that most of these things on our list are either completed or in motion. First one is a vision for the area, and certainly the city has a vision with the First and Main Transit and Revitalization Plan, and we applaud the staff and the city for putting that together. It's visionary, and it will be the roadmap to help redevelop this area. The city and LDDA participation in public-private partnership, which we'll talk about later, both very important to seeing this area transform. Flexible mixed-use zoning and approvals, that's very important to move the projects along and to work within the market and the constraints of the market as this area develops. Specific public improvements. And these are specific to this area in general, and I think David mentioned some of these, but I can't speak enough to them as to their importance, because one project in this area doesn't make the transition and the transformation. It has to be a series of things that come together. And the South Main Street improvements and streetscape are very important to, as you come into the south part of town, That's what the visual of what people are going to see. And it's important that that is improved and updated. The river corridor, that's in motion, and that's going to be critical as well, just because of the experience along the river and the trail connections and all the things associated with that. The First and Main Station, we believe that's a little further out, but we believe it will be there at some point. Hopefully with bus coming first, rail and commuter rail coming later, and hopefully we can see that bus happen in the next year or two. The construction of Dickens Park, very important, again, to the experience in that area of town, connecting 119 up to downtown and having some what I would call urban open space. The Boston Avenue expansion, another thing that's critical and important, connecting the east-west sides of town, and then also the connection through the park. So all of these things are specific public improvements that are already in motion. They have their own schedule and timeline, but we think that they're very important to keep and run consistent with our plans. The last thing on my list is a catalyst project in this area that gets it going from the private sector, and that we believe to be Butterball. Most of you, all of you know where the property is, but to put it in context, in this slide, it shows the size and magnitude that it represents in the area, and it's very rare to have this large of a property under one ownership, and so we think there's a real opportunity there to create some significant change quickly, which will then send the message to the market that this area is transforming. This is the plan on the screen, I think over the next 25 years, so it's a large plan, but needs to get started now. The Butterball properties are 7 different properties, about 27 acres. As you know, most people know the main plant, which sits on Main Street, but there are a number of properties around it. Which one? Oh, it won't work on the screen. Okay, well, you can see it's up on the screen, but I'll walk you through a phased approach that we're pursuing. But this slide really shows you the magnitude. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, you're not seeing the larger parcel, which is 12.5 acres, which would sit on Dickens Park. It just sits south of First Avenue. So this will not come without challenges, as transformations generally have. This area of town, as everybody knows, is blighted and has some properties that need to be redeveloped. The public perception of the area is low. There's a lot of risk here for redevelopment. We see a mixed-use scheme with residential, retail, office in a phased approach, but it's not going to be easy. This area has very low rental rates across the board, housing, commercial, retail. So we've got to improve that over time. The plan itself, significant demolition, site prep and cleanup costs. There's over 300,000 square feet of building there that's been built over the last 50 years. So all that has to be dealt with. The railroad tracks, not so much just the tracks, but the noise and the smells. Those are things that we're going to have to deal with, particularly if we're talking about a residential district. And then the periphery properties. Hopefully those transition over time, but it's probably not going to happen all at once. And so the properties to the south and to the east are unlikely to change anytime soon. So these are all things that we believe can be overcome, but they are challenges and they create risk, and we have to address them up front. Here's a view to our phasing plan. So as I mentioned, the 7 properties, we see the project developing in 3 major phases. Phase 1 consists of the main plant, which sits right on Main Street. It's about 6.5 acres. It's a large parcel. There's 2 properties to the north of that, which you may be familiar with, 220 Kimbark and 202 Emory. Currently, these have older flex kind of industrial buildings on them. We think that they're prime for reuse, and we see a number of uses there, and we'll walk you through what we're pursuing on the next slide. Phase 2 really consists of the properties flanking the main plant site. So the property next to the cheese importers on Main Street, which we see as a commercial mixed-use property, and then what we are calling the second phase of the multifamily in phase 1, which is the sort of pie-shaped piece to the east of the main plant. We see that as part of phase 2 as well. Phase 3 starts to takes you down to the large parcel along First Avenue. And so what's significant about that is that area sort of developing in parallel with the Boston Extension, Dickens Park, and all of that starts to create a district down there that feeds off of some of the public infrastructure that's being put together right now. So in Phase 1, as I mentioned, there's 2 properties that sit on Emory and 2nd Avenue. About 40,000 square feet of space that's underutilized right now and not really, it's being used, but it could be used a lot better. We see adaptive reuse there. Our targeted uses are consistent with where some of the local zoning has gone over the last year and a half with craft brewery, urban winery or distillery, artisan food. So we're trying to embrace the food and beverage industry that exists around here and bring that into downtown, which it's already happening, and just continue to build on that to activate the area and create some nighttime and some daytime uses. Also creative office and co-working. You may have heard of some of this is happening in some of the other towns, downtown Denver, Lodo, Boulder, some of the other areas. We think that there's a real opportunity for that in Longmont with some of these buildings, and excited to bring that use as well. The large plant site, which is 6.5 acres, would really be the starting point and create the most amount of change in the shortest amount of time. We see 3 and 4 story multifamily there, and I'll show you some concepts of what it looks like. It's an urban design that's pushed up to the edge of the sidewalk. Internal parking, so the parking's hidden. You don't see a big sea of asphalt. We'll show you how that looks. Highly amenitized to get people to come and live in this area. So a clubhouse, pool, urban green space, gathering areas, things like that. And we want to make sure that it's connected and it's walkable and you can easily get to downtown and some of the other areas that are going to develop the transit station. Here's some of the early concepts for Phase 1, and this is more of a top view looking at the site plan of how the buildings could lay out. And as I mentioned, these are urban-looking buildings that are pushed up to the sidewalk, right up to the edge, internal parking garages and surface lots, internal green space and urban parkways. And then the slide that just came up was more the elevations of what it might look like from the edge of the street. How the buildings lay out, and this is a product that is being built across the country, but it's becoming popular in some of the urban nodes and some of the areas outside of major downtown areas where you're looking for 3 and 4 story buildings. Phases 2 and 3, a little more just conceptual right now because Phase 1 is really the driver. It gets everything going. Phase 2 really consists of the 121 Main Street, which is the property next to the cheese importers. And what we envision there is more of what you're seeing on Main Street, retail on the first floor, office above. 110 Collier, that's the pie-shaped piece, if you'll recall, that sits east of the main plant site. That we've got programmed for more multifamily, sort of the second phase of the multifamily with shared amenities. And then the 301 First Avenue parcel, that's a property that's down off First Avenue. That's the large parcel that would be on Dickens Park. And that has potential for a number of different uses. That could be high-density multifamily and single-family residential along the park. There could be some live-work there in sort of a mixed-use setting. It also could become a commercial campus or maybe an institutional use, which would be a school or college or something like that. So a little more flexible down there. That parcel and that property in that area starts to develop as the rest of the Phase 1 and Phase 2 move forward. So the main point of the presentation is, as David mentioned and as I teed up at the beginning, is to talk about this public-private partnership and why it's necessary. We believe that this is vital to the transformation of this area and is necessary to implement the vision of the First and Main and revitalization and transit plan. As I mentioned, there's a number of challenges for this area, and so we're seeking a public-private partnership to help move this along. There's a high risk of new development, and it's an unproven market. And so specifically what we're asking for is assistance with the demolition of the existing plant and some of the facilities around the plant, and the cleanup of the area. We're also asking for fee waivers and water and sewer credits necessary for the redevelopment and the adaptive reuse. The fee waiver structure is already in place. These properties are located in the LDDA and the Urban Renewal District, and so these are mechanisms that you currently have and that have been used for other projects downtown. We also need to address the train. We need to address the noise, and we're asking that we move quickly to convert this to a quiet zone. And I know that there's already a movement afoot to make that happen throughout the city, but we're asking that the focus is brought to First and Main to help move this along. And those of you who I know you've all been there, it's loud and it's disruptive, so we've got to address that. And then the last thing are the items we mentioned before, which all fall into this public-private partnership and the sequencing of the events, and the South Main Street and Boston Avenue extension, Dickens Park, and the River Corridor, and the transit station in general. So all of these put together, in our view, become what is the makeup of the public-private partnership that will help transform this area and move specifically the Butterball redevelopment forward. So just to summarize everything we talked about, we believe there's a significant community benefit to the First and Main area redevelopment and the South Main Street corridor. The public-private partnership is needed to transform the area. Our plan that we have today, which is preliminary, but we've been mindful to make sure it's consistent with the local zoning, the revised zoning, the community plan, and the vision for that part of town. In the end, we believe that what we're proposing will bring over 400 residential units to the area and new commercial and the reuse of existing and underutilized commercial, which will help activate the area. This represents a significant private investment in downtown Longmont, and so in combination with the public and the city investment and the private investment, that's how we believe we make this happen. And lastly, Butterball is the catalyst project that we believe will help transform the area. It's going to bring new residents to downtown, and it's going to help to bolster the local businesses up and down Main Street and in the general area. So thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Councilmember Christensen.
That's a great presentation.
We need to have you speaking in the mic. Thank you.
That's a great presentation. And I think, I'm very excited about this. I think it will absolutely transform this area into something so much better and something really wonderful for downtown. I've seen this work really successfully and really quickly in, say, Yerba Buena area of San Francisco, and transforming it from habitat for winos into a really vital and very profitable area and a very livable area. So I congratulate you, and I will certainly be voting for it.
Well, thank you, Brian. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I believe what we need is a motion to suspend Council Rule of Procedure 25 and designate May 13th as a regular session, and I would move that.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Levison.
Thank you. I guess we're not actually talking about anything but changing study session to regular session, but I think we need to look at the phasing, and it's not realistic to think that we can catalyze all 23 acres, because that's a lot and over a long period of time. So I think I'm always very concerned about the financials, and I know the second item we're going to address looks at some financial aspects of it as well. I think that I would like, as I told you when we met, individually, that I'd like to actually see it taller. And the other thing is, it looks very much like Roosevelt Park Apartments and a lot of what's going on in Boulder. I'd like to see something maybe in the design that is got a Longmont tweak to it, whether it would be, using more stone or something, but a lot of it looks like you could plop it down in the same city along the Front Range, and it's, the product, as you say. So I think you did something. I know someone who moved up to Lincoln Place has been very, very happy with being in that downtown location. So I know that this is the kind of thing many people are looking for, is a kind of a lifestyle, more of an urban lifestyle too. So, and I lived in something similar as a teenager in I think our building was 4 or 5 stories with an elevator. So I think it's something that works, and it's just going to be, the money is the rub always.
Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Thank you. Not the first time I've heard this presentation. First and foremost, thank you for your interest in our city. I think that everything in your presentation was spot on as far as what needs to happen with the Catalyst project there on First and Main. I think it's fair that you guys know kind of what's in our head. I can't speak for everybody else, but I guess in my head, if you were to come to council and say we need $100 million to do it, the answer is no. No public-private partnership. And if you come and you say we just need $1, it's like, giddy up, yippee-ki-yay, let's get her done. So moving forward, what I'll be looking at, in my mind, is what's the cost-benefit analysis as we move forward in the partnership. Questions that I'll have in the future are, what will the tax revenues be to the city, both directly as a result of people living there, because I know that it's not going to be retail, it'll be residential units, but what will be the secondary, meaning I'm sure it will have a catalyst and an impact on surrounding stores and whatnot. Now, how you figure that out, Mr. Starnes, I will be looking to you, but that will be something. The other question that comes to mind is, is now the time to just knock out the quiet zones? I mean, I don't know how much it would cost, but is now the time just to suck it up and pull the trigger? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if it's possible in that area. And so as I look at it, you as the business owner, we can throw out what we think you should or should not do there in that particular area. We'll all have our input, but the basic level, as far as I'm concerned, do what you think that you need to do to earn money, and then we will look at it to see if financially it's good for us. And I just pray that it all works out, because the city needs it, and you guys have done great work in other cities, and we've done similar projects with the mall, with Roosevelt Apartments, and I just think it would be a shame not to figure out a way to get this done. So I'm also going to support the motion by my esteemed colleague, Councilmember Finley, to go ahead and suspend the rules and change the May 13th session to a regular session, because I'm anxious to hear more and do what we need to do to get things moving.
Mayor, Councilman Bagley, regarding your question about the kind of return on investment, I do have a preliminary economic and fiscal impact analysis that shows, based on a DOT-out, again, a phased approach, based on conceptual, because as Brian alluded to, we know we're doing for phase 1, phase 2, and 3. It's a bit more ambiguous, but I've estimated the sales and property tax impacts and spin-off taxes associated with this reinvestment in the area compared to what the property generates now in tax revenue, which might be beneficial to understand. So I'd be happy to, at the appropriate time, share that information with you all as you make your decisions moving forward.
And tonight's not the appropriate time, because we don't need to get into that kind of detail.
It's not done yet.
But yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I know that, Loveland and Fort Collins, everybody's been fighting this quiet zone. And, one of the problems is you can't just do one street. I mean, they all kind of link together. You have to do a whole zone. So, I guess that will be an issue we've got to figure out how to work. But that's not an easy issue, and it's not a cheap issue. So
the other piece of the quiet zone is the rulemaking that's going on right now, and what that will mean in terms of the requirements and fundamentally the cost of creating the quiet zones. And so that process is moving. And so there are some moving targets, but we are engaged in those discussions.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. And I would agree, David, at the appropriate time, I'd like to see all that when it finally comes to council, and I'll support the motion changing the study session to a regular session. Brian, thank you for the presentation. I'm excited to see finally something that might happen at the Butterball plant. I'm sure it's generating nothing, so nothing from getting nothing there and seeing something happening and actually generating something. Yeah, as I actually said with the mall redevelopment, when you generate, you're getting nothing. You generate nothing, you're going to get nothing. So if you're going to invest a little bit to end up generating something, sometimes you have to roll the dice. But also with that, however it's designed, I'm not a designer. I don't think any of us are. So however it comes out, I'm not going to tell you the shade of yellow, whether it's an interior parking, exterior parking, however, it's, I'm not a planner, I'm not a designer, I'm a council member. I'm public policy, and I'm an accountant. So if the numbers work, David will give us the best advice he possibly can. Jim Golden will give us the best advice possibly can. Harold, staff will give us the best advice they possibly can. If the numbers work, it'll work. However it needs to work on your end and the partners that you have, you'll design it the best way you possibly can in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And then we'll go from there. I'm not going to tell you, I don't like that shade of blue. I remember several years ago, one council member said, I don't like the shade of yellow on this building. Really, we're going to have an argument on the shade of yellow. And that was before I was even on council. So again, design it how you need it to make it work for the project that you need to make it work. And the rest that we need to address, we'll see if we can do it.
Mayor,
Okay.
Council,
Go ahead.
if I can jump in, I think if you look at what Brian talked about on the slides, there's a couple of pieces that we're going to be bringing to you. Tonight after this item, Kathy will talk about the Section 108 loan. That's a piece that we need to start working on associated with this option. The other piece on the 13th, in terms of making it a regular session, we'll discuss an ordinance related to the water and sewer credits that exist because of the unique circumstances that this location presents. As we get direction from council on those two pieces, then we move into the agreement and where all of it comes together. We're going to have to step you through the process as we move forward on these other items.
Councilmember Levison.
So I guess we're just all assuming that you've signed the deal and purchased the property already? No, okay,
We're still finishing up our due diligence.
okay, all right, because we still have this other little issue with the corporation you're purchasing from, this kind of little lawsuit thing that we have to straighten out, all that stuff too, so.
Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. That's a good point. And I guess, if I were them, I'd be watching tonight. That's also a big obstacle and roadblock. I just want to point out, I don't remember the exact prediction on what it would cost for, let's suppose we lose a lawsuit. I'll bet that would be about the same as the quiet zones throughout the entire city. So if we could clear that up, everybody wins. So just saying.
All right, we've got a motion. It's been seconded. Let's vote. Okay, that passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Coombs, your next item is approval to use affordable housing funds as grant funding to support applications to HUD, and Kathy Fedler is here to present this.
There we go. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Kathy Fedler, CDBG and Affordable Housing Programs Coordinator. So tonight I'm here to ask permission to use up to $95,000 in affordable housing funds to hire a couple of subject professionals to help us analyze and determine eligibility, prepare and submit backup documentation and applications for two specific projects. As you may be aware, the affordable housing funds are specifically for and to support affordable housing projects and must be loaned or should be loaned. In the past, we have requested if there was a need to grant the funds, and that's why I'm coming to you tonight. So these two projects need to move forward quickly to support flood recovery efforts and the project that you just heard about. So the first project that we're seeking funding is to hire a specialized consulting firm to help prepare a flood-related unmet needs assessment, specifically for Longmont. If you remember, we prepared something pretty quickly right after the flood happened, which went to the state to help support the application to receive CDBG DR funds on the statewide basis. And as a result of that, the state received just under $63 million from that first tranche of funding. The second tranche of funding of 119 some million has been allocated. The state doesn't have it yet. Actually, the Federal Register hasn't come out yet, but we will have to be supporting that funding with an additional unmet needs assessment that will go to the state, as well as it would be extremely helpful to really have a better, much better idea of exactly what are our local needs so that we can begin to address those needs in a more comprehensive fashion. At this point, we know that there's X number of dwelling units that were damaged. We don't know the extent of that. We don't know if they still are damaged. We don't know if, some work has been done, exactly what kind of level of work still needs to happen, and what folks aren't back in their housing, that kind of stuff. So getting information on that in particular and on the business needs. I was just at Woodley's looking at furniture and just had somebody happen to say, well, we're backed up in our orders because we lost X number of orders in the flood, which set us back. So they're like 4 months behind in preparing orders. I didn't have any idea about that. I don't know if other folks in the city did, but that's the kind of unmet need and economic loss that could go in and support additional CDBG DR funding. And or we could be designing programs to help meet that need. So the first $70,000 is what it would cost to complete the unmet needs assessment in about 6 weeks. Again, we would also be using that to see if we can get a direct subrecipient allocation from the state. We know we cannot get one directly from HUD, but using that to leverage how great the need is in Longmont compared to other areas of the state might be able to get us a direct allocation as part of that 119 million.
So part of the conversation that we've been having is obviously with the first tranche of money that was released, we're going into the state process. We have been having discussions with HUD on this concept, and we're talking to the state about a direct allocation to Longmont based on the need that exists. And so in preparation for that, it's really important that the needs analysis is done, because then you have to create a plan based on that needs analysis if you get the direct allocation so you can spend it on what's been identified. Also wanted to jump in. One of the questions we've gotten from council is, can you do this internally as staff? The answer is really now no, and the reason why it's no is not because they don't have the technical ability, but when you just look at the volume of work in terms of the first round and the processes that we're having to go through just to meet that demand associated with the existing, with the first phase of the flood recovery, we're actually looking at staffing up to meet the demand, the requirements in reporting, processing the applications, and everything else. And so what we're really faced with now is a sense of, under normal circumstances, we would potentially be able to do that. We are not operating in normal circumstances based on just the amount of work that's going on with all of the projects.
So one quick question. My understanding is we hire this consultant to do this feasibility study so we can get this direct allocation, which I think is a good idea not to go through the state. But then that cost is also reimbursable as part of that, so we can probably get some of that money back. Is that true?
Mayor Coombs, that's correct. So if we do receive a direct allocation, then we could reimburse the Affordable Housing Fund for the cost of preparing the unmet needs assessment and or the action plan that would be required. So,
great. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I think this is a good idea. One of the concerns I've always have, though, is what's the source of the data? Are they going to go knock on everybody's door? How can we be assured with confidence that this is actually going to come through and be correct?
Mayor Coombs and Councilmember Moore. So that's why we're hiring a specialized consultant, because they're used to doing this. They have access to data that we do not have access to. FEMA, SBA, et cetera, the data we got from them is in this raw form that you have to figure out what do all these things mean. They know that going in. They have relationships with the folks, so they get data that normally we would not have access to, and have the capability of crunching it and putting it together in the way that HUD wants to see. So certain levels of damage translate to certain average repair costs. There's a whole formulaic kind of a thing that they're equipped to do. Their proposal talked about getting that kind of data, as well as doing some focus groups, some outreach, talking to nonprofit organizations that might be dealing with folks to have access to contact information, as well as just what are some of the folks in the community seeing, holding special meetings, that kind of thing. So this is something that they go around and do, unfortunately, in communities that have disasters. So they're very well equipped and understand the process and what needs to go into it and how to get that information.
So I guess how do we measure the validity of the result?
Well, to a certain extent, I wouldn't say it's a wag. It's a very educated guess. It's as good as you can get. And it changes, because as you get funding and you take care of some things, then your unmet need changes depending on what's still unmet. So at any point in time, it's kind of like the point in time homeless study. At any point in time, this is the snapshot, and it may change by next month or next year, kind of thing. But it's something that has to be done. It has to be done in a certain way to be eligible to receive a direct allocation.
Okay, thank you.
So if I can jump in there. So one of the pieces when we went through the disaster, individuals went through the individual assistance programs. The businesses were focused on the small business. They were going through a different channel. For example, Dan recently got access to the FEMA data. The problem is then in crunching and interpreting that data, we just don't have the time at this point to learn it and move through the process. So in terms of the validity of the data, that is the self-reported data that individuals who were impacted by the flood submitted into the FEMA process. And so if they applied for FEMA assistance, it's in there. The group will then take that data and put it together in a package that HUD is used to seeing to help make our case. And so when you talk about the validity of it, it is the raw data from the individuals themselves and what they turned into the process in terms of being eligible for FEMA dollars and moving through that process. So it's pretty granular information that we get directly from those individuals.
Updated
Updated
to
as,
what has happened
right.
since the flood.
So because they update the information within the FEMA system.
Councilmember Bagley. Thank you, Mayor Combs. I guess the couple of things, because it's you, and that's a good thing. I view you, Kathy Fedler, and Karen Roney, I've said it time and time again, as the conscience of our city, because you guys are looking out for the poor, impoverished, and those who are afflicted. So that's good. I'm glad that you continue to do that. The other thing that comes to mind is, so when we had coffee with council, we've heard from the League of Women Voters, both at Coffee with Council and at council meetings, making the claim that there were people displaced by the flood that continue to be displaced, that they need help. I've heard private citizens make the claim that there are people, whether it be in homes or mobile homes, who are trading property and homes and vehicles because they can't get help. I've heard that there are undocumented folks who are scared to ask for help or need help because they don't want to be, introduced to the immigration process. I've heard of businesses that have overcome and not overcome. The point is, we don't know. I mean, that's really what the answer is. And when I read this, basically it's a mechanism to find out. And I don't think we can act or help or not help until we actually know. And so I think that if you don't have the time or the expertise, what I'm hearing staff say is we need some help. And in order to get the answers that I think are important to help those who need help or don't help if it's not needed, we need data. So I think that's a good idea. And on the second one, the Section 108 loan application, it sounds like it relates directly to what we heard under Section 11A. We're not committing to anything, but what we're doing is lining up our dominoes in order to seek federal assistance and grant funding in order to maybe demolish a big old butterball plant. And I think that's a great idea. And so I'm all for option one and would move that we approve the use of AH funds for these two applications.
Councilmember Levison.
Thank you. I wish Kathy would have gotten through the second item presentation because I think we might have jumped the gun on this. I have a couple of concerns. I also think it's a good idea to have this kind of high-level technical assistance to crunch the data, because I imagine whatever consultant we're going to use has done all the coding to pull off all the data sets. And just like we had our hackathon where we provided data sets and people went at it, it's very sophisticated checks and balances to get what you need for the real information from the raw data. And I'm just assuming that they're going to be using the latest figures from FEMA and that we come up with some number. My concern, and I guess we have to figure out a way to do it, and I'm not sure I understand clearly whether or not this consultant would also kind of be as a lobbyist advisor, that they would tell us what to say to lobby more persuasively when we've already been told that no way, no how, that we're going to get direct allocation. I can't tell you how many people I have repeatedly talked to about direct allocation. And I am concerned that we have, shy of $1 million in an affordable housing fund that has really no renewal mechanism. So the more we spend the money down, we know average what we have of things being paid off that go back into the fund. So I would support the one, but I'm not supporting the second one, and especially because I'd like Kathy, before we made the motion, to be able to give us the presentation. I see that the Affordable Housing Fund in the first circumstance could actually have a direct effect on people that are that CDBG qualified folks with a certain income category, and workers and businesses that pay that CDBG wage. The second part with the Section 108, there are a lot of ins and outs to the loan guarantee. And I also took some time this afternoon to look on the HUD website, and most of those projects actually had an affordable housing component to them. And I haven't heard from the developer if there's any affordable housing whatsoever, or if we're just going to assume the trickle-down theory again, that, if you build more housing, all the less expensive housing in Longmont is somehow going to be freed up and become less expensive for everybody that still needs less expensive housing. So as a combined motion for both of them, I'm going to vote no because of the Section 108. We haven't heard that part of the presentation yet.
Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. We can always wait till after we've heard the presentation to vote. But I guess the other thing is, this is just data. We're collecting data, meaning that maybe the consultant comes back and says, hey, you know what? You really need an affordable housing component, at which point, that's another piece of data that we can use as a bargaining position with our esteemed potential partners and be able to actually help the people under number one, the unmet needs assessment. So I'm looking forward to hearing what else you have to say, Ms. Feather.
If I can add one piece to the conversation on the direct allocation in terms of what's changed in the world. So the big piece is in conversations with HUD, in this type of situation with DR dollars, HUD said, you're not going to get an allocation from us directly. However, they have indicated to us that they are encouraging the state to do direct allocations to the entitlement communities. So that's actually a message that now we're not only sending, but HUD has indicated that they're having the same conversation. So that's a new piece of information that's moved into the discussion in terms of the DR dollars.
The way I look at it, this 70K is our only access to releasing our share of the 119 million. If we don't do this and we don't have the wherewithal to do it as effectively, it's just a small investment to potentially unleash a huge amount, millions and millions of dollars, and get payback on the 70K as part of the repayment. So I think it's a good risk, and I'm going to be supporting that.
Do you want me to talk about the 108 part of it?
Sure, go ahead.
All right, so the second project is to hire a separate specialized consultant that has experience in analyzing, preparing, submitting, and coordinating with both HUD DC and HUD Denver to prepare a Section 108 loan guarantee application. So it would actually work a little differently so that it is set up in phases. If it goes all the way through to project submission, then the full amount would be due, but it is set up, it would be in phases. So due diligence is the first phase, which would look at what is the project, how would we make it eligible, what would that take, if we have to do slum blight, what does that look like, because not the full amount of what we would borrow can be used for slum blight. If it had job creation or it had affordable housing component, what would that look like? So like you said, bringing something back with a recommendation for further negotiation, or yes, this could move forward, no, it couldn't, for the city to make a decision about. So each phase is set up separately, and the city and the consultant both have to agree to move forward with the next phase. So the due diligence is the first phase. The second phase would be preparing a draft application for everyone to look at and get prepared for that. And then finally, if that's moving forward, to go ahead and submit the final application and then work with both HUD offices on getting it through and approved, and then actually helping us set up. If we get to that point with the loan, that it has to get set up a certain way, and there's interim financing, and then there's final financing, and all the ins and outs of that whole program is very complex. So again, that one would be looking at just under $25,000 if it goes through the full way. The funds are not eligible for reimbursement from the 108 program if we do receive that. We could reimburse with the annual CDBG allocation, but again, right now what we had been talking about was repaying at least the 150 Main development if it moves forward, repaying it with part of the CDBG allocation. So that's taken a lot of money out of that. Of course, that's ultimately your decision to do, but that it would just further reduce the funding that's available for as many years as it takes to pay off the application costs and then the actual loan costs. So, and so I think that is all I wanted to say on that so far.
Mayor, if I could add one thing to that, or two items. First of all, we do believe that there is some capacity in our annual CDBG allocation for funds that we've been contributing to the Colorado Enterprise Fund. This was something that I think we discussed in a previous meeting, that some of the funds that we've been contributing towards that could go towards the repayment of this 108 loan. Secondly, with regard to Councilmember Levison's question regarding affordable housing, even if this project doesn't contain affordable housing, it still potentially meets two objectives that HUD has identified as national objectives. for CDBG dollars to be spent. One could be job creation from the jobs that could be created from this development. And the second one is the fact that it would be eliminating a blighted condition in a low-income census tract.
Thank you. Councilmember Levinson.
Except the low-income census tract is actually a commercial industrial area, not a lot of housing right there, and not historically a lot of housing. So I guess I'm still uncomfortable with this 108 application. Can you tell me at what the various phases are as far as the cost as the $25,000?
So the first phase, the due diligence phase is around $7,700. The second phase, which is the application, is estimated at $12,800. The post-application submission and working with HUD is at $2,200, so that should add up to. And then there's some reimbursables if we want them to come out and physically look at the site or physically work on anything. So some of the reimbursables are about $2,800, so that should get to $24,400 is the actual cost estimate at this point in time.
So from a professional perspective, do you feel comfortable, I mean, committing CDBG annual funding, knowing how it can be cut 20 or 25% every year, sucking off a commitment? Do you feel comfortable about doing that with the great number of projects we've had demand for CDBG money?
Well, I mean, that is ultimately council's decision to make. I present the information and what the consequences are, and we will be taking this, and it will be presented as part of the budgeting recommendations that the Housing Advisory Board will be looking at Thursday, and then bringing to you May 20th or first part of June, whenever that comes back to you guys. So that will be taken into consideration and for them to take a look at too. What is the trade-off? What are the consequences to that? So you can make an informed decision.
And I know in the past, the in-between had gotten a nice chunk of CDBG money as we can see, their ongoing renovation of the property in the 200 block of Kaufman, knowing that we've got, St. Breen Manor had the elevator, and a lot of the senior accessibility issues and other projects depend on CDBG, plus some of our nonprofits with their child care centers have a great need to keep their buildings up. So I don't feel greatly comfortable about this. I actually would feel more comfortable instead of taking money from the affordable housing if we use council contingency funds somewhat to put some of our own skin in the game, as opposed to committing future CDBG money. And as you explained to me on the phone this afternoon, we can't exceed a 20% administrative cap, so sometimes it could be, we couldn't be paying back very much if we get close to that admin cap. Is that correct?
Of the $25,000
right.
for the consultant, right?
So it might take us 5, 6, 7 years to pay it back. Okay. And then I guess what would be the total loan amount for a Section 108 loan?
So that would be somewhere between, we can get 5 times our annual grant, which is the maximum that we can get. So if you look at base it on our 2014 grant, which is going to be about $560,000, that would be $2.8 million. If you base it on the 2013 grant, so assuming there may be a cut, that was $550,000. That would be $2.7 million could be borrowed. So.
And then, and typically when I started reading about the Section 108 program on the HUD website, I saw a lot of projects where the loan was paid back through TIF or by the developer. It was basically like a pass-through financing. What's the concept for this project?
I believe right now, and again, I think part of the due diligence would flush this out, but what has been talked about right now is that the repayment for the amount that would be used on the 150 Main project would be repaid from our ongoing annual CDBG fund, not from the developer.
Okay. So that would further reduce the amount of CDBG funds that could be used throughout the community for the next maybe 20 years.
Yeah, that was the estimated 184 figure that I had in the communication.
Okay. Great, thanks.
Okay, we've got a motion. It's been seconded. It's time to vote. Okay, passed 7-0.
Can I have my 10 minutes of my life back? No.
It is.
You may not.
If that changes, then we wouldn't need to.
Okay, now it's time for final call. Public invited to be heard. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak at this point? I guess seeing no one, I'll close final call. Public invited to be heard. Now it's time for mayor and council comments. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Just wanted to mention my business of the week, as is my custom. 300 Suns Brewing at 335 First Avenue, Unit C is now open. They are open Monday through Thursday, 2 to 9, Friday and Saturday, noon to 10, and Sunday, noon to 8. And tomorrow night's ladies' night. Just saying.
I'm there.
Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I just those Loco stickers. That's the second one I've seen. I'll pay for them. I want some. So, I won't go down and get any because I'll just put it off till they're all gone. So if somebody could pick me up about 10 of them, I will pay for them.
We will get those to all the council members.
But I will pay for 9 additional ones.
It's from Visit. It's from Visit Longmont.
They're cool. They're awesome.
Councilmember Levison.
Yes, I'd like to thank all the people that went to clean up downtown. I guess last week I forgot there were 170 people that did the cleanup of downtown on April 25th, and I was one of them. And it's very gratifying to see downtown looking so wonderful. So I commend all the people involved and all the great organization of LDDA. And I also want to thank Niwot High School History and Government, I was going to say professor, not really, Doug Duffy, who teaches at Niwot High School. I had one of his students shadowing me on Thursday and a bit at Cinco de Mayo, and kept her really busy all afternoon Thursday. And I also want to say how appreciative I am of a wonderful community event that Cinco de Mayo was this year, and thankful that the weather was great and we had no big rainstorm at the end. And I just want to wish all the St. Vrain students good luck on finals. They're probably digging deep now and getting ready to do all that good brain work to get through finals.
Actually, wasn't it Trace de Mayo? Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. Good time. Good time was had by all very early on at Cinco de Mayo. It was nice seeing everyone out there and listening to the music and seeing all just a nice, diverse crowd at Cinco de Mayo at Roosevelt Park. I would encourage council members and staff and residents to call, and I don't have a number for him, but Senator Matt Jones tomorrow on House Bill 1375 and urge him to vote no. It's the urban renewal bill that unfortunately got out of the House since Representative Singer voted for it, which I gave him a very, he and I had a very interesting conversation at Cinco de Mayo and expressed our displeasure with his yes vote and how that really undermined Longmont's position on urban renewal and what that could do to Longmont and urban renewal in the city in future years. Apparently, it's going to, I believe, third reading tomorrow, and it's tomorrow morning, it's my understanding that Senator Jones is supporting this bill, despite our calls and emails. And if it's like what Representative Singer did, he wasn't returning any calls. It's unfortunate that our representatives that represent the city aren't listening to the representatives that represent the people of Longmont. And I believe that was a unanimous vote of all of us. This will put back urban renewal for the city years if this should be signed by the governor. So I would urge all of us to call Senator Jones and express our request that he vote no.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I'm sorry I didn't mean to talk twice, but should that pass the Senate, could we direct staff to please send a letter to the governor asking him to veto that bill?
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Second.
Also, I wanted everybody to see where their fast track dollars have gone. This is a lovely bottle of water celebrating the new Union Station. And you could probably get your own bottle of water if you went to their opening ceremonies on Friday. So if you want to know where the fast track money is, here it is.
Councilmember Moore.
That might be the only thing we get out of fast tracks.
Okay. Well, you have a motion and it's been seconded, so let's vote on that. And that passes 7-0. Okay. I'd also like to thank the staff that put in a lot of extra hours on Trace DeMaio at Roosevelt Park. So.
Cinco de Mayo celebration here.
Trace DeMaio. City Manager, any remarks?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
City Attorney, any comments?
No comments, Mayor.
This meeting is adjourned.
Edge of our seats each week.